Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today, we're going to be talking about family transitions in the metal and steel industry. I have Greg Sheldon, who's an expert in this industry and speaks for all generations of metal and steel industry people to show the world their value. Without them, modern life wouldn't be possible. While doing that, his goal is to help these folks be more successful in their careers and retirement. He feels he owes it to a generation of people before him to move this industry forward for a new generation of operators. His generation, our generation. Greg not only acquires metal companies using equity sharing, but helps owners pass the baton from one generation to the next. Greg, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. What an intro. Wow.
That's your intro, man.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I'll say I do podcasts, but this is the first time I've ever been on somebody else's. So it's interesting to hear the other way around.
Yeah, well, it's hard sometimes to take like recognition and pat ourselves on the back for the things that we've done. And so the first thing that I thought about when I brought you on the show was, oh my God, Jonathan, do you remember when that's where you started your coaching career? Like the San Fernando Valley Machine and Tooling Association is a very large but dissipating organization here, because machinists is what made up, small business machine shops is what made up the valley, because the San Fernando Valley was home to companies like Rocketdyne and I think Lockheed Martin. They were all building aircraft in Southern California, and all these machine shops that had to come up with nuts and bolts. And so I used to go out and be a speaker, and I had my articles published in their journals, and it was a pretty interesting group of people. And this is your homies, right? These are the guys that you've hung out with.
They're my homies, man. Definitely times that we're not homies, but when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you sit around and have a bunch of beers, and you really do care about each other. And I'll just add that nobody appointed me the representative. I decided to do that just simply because I felt that there, was a demand and need for somebody to say, okay, there's this whole generation retiring, right? These baby boomers. And sometimes it's family that's taking over, and that's great. But a lot of times there isn't, because, we all have seen that technology in like technology spaces, fintech, and all these other spaces are very sexy, very interesting, and I don't dispute that. But all of us steel people would feel the same way about the metals industry. So there are some of us out there like myself, and we want to say, hey, this industry is really interesting, but there's also some things that can be done, to bring it to the new generation like myself. And that really came about from being in it and being in management, and some of the not seeing some things that could be there, right? So
so take us a little bit through your background, and then maybe before we even get to that, Like, what's so special about the steel and metal industry? These are like the forgotten industries of America. And they, are they mostly in the heartland of America? Or, I mean, obviously I know it from being on the West Coast and seeing seeing how they fed the aerospace industry, but a lot of that industry has gone away from Southern California. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, a lot of manufacturing has gone elsewhere, right?
Right.
And we all know that because of everything that's happened globally, which is changing right now. And it's a bit of a biased opinion, but I'm excited about that. That deglobalization and onshoring, is becoming a thing because we saw through COVID that global supply chains are not as stable as we thought they were, right? So, and then we've got, other global things happening, like, populations are an issue, and also pricing, right? You've got these countries that came out of the third world and are coming into having, wages that, they should have. However, that makes it difficult to compete on the global stage, right? So people are starting to think locally, which is excellent.
And what are they bringing back onto the shore in terms of metal and steel manufacturing that got lost to China or other countries?
Well, we're seeing things that are being made here, manufacturing, right? So there's, a big interest. I mean, I see a lot of these things on the back end where there's people looking for investment, right? So, and the appetite, which is always the front lines, of investing is, those guys are right on the cutting edge of what's going on. So we're seeing some people interested in investing in local things, whether it's, galvanizing plant or it's a manufacturing, plant that, outsources locally, another neighboring town, right? We just actually here recently had a battery manufacturing facility, startup that's building. So, I mean, it's not just metals that's happening right? It's happening kind of across the board in manufacturing, but it's really nice to see. So specifically, there's a ton of things. I mean, it is, and Cleveland Cliffs are starting to pump out the sheets, and it's really, getting, I mean, we're seeing pretty steady this year, but there's, talk about it increasing, right? So,
So when we think of places like Pittsburgh, are these still very strong in steel manufacturing, and companies like Bethlehem Steel and big names like that, are they still doing a lot of work in the United States? Are they bringing that back to the United States?
That is what I'm hearing. Okay. Definitely, I think it's coming back. Just because there's that demand to see that local manufacturing happening, right?
Right.
So it's exciting, I believe.
Yeah.
Right. And so do a lot of people that do the machining, like you say, and the fabrication work. So, can't speak to the numbers, Jonathan, exactly what these guys are doing, just because I don't have that at my fingertips. But, it's definitely the sentiments out there that this stuff's changing.
You're old enough, or you look old enough, to have experienced and watched the decline of the industry and manufacturing moving offshore.
Yes.
And people maybe not investing even at a public stock exchange level in these types of companies, and they're looking towards greener pastures. They're interested in the tech names and, companies like Tesla, who probably use a ton of metal in there. Right.
Well, and to touch on your point earlier, and that is, what is it about the metals industry, the steel industry that is special is, well, I don't know if it's special. I believe, everything you can think of that you use on a daily basis, even your phones and the connections between the phone to the power to everything is utilizing metal in one shape, way, or form, right? The hydro towers, the cell towers, all these things require metal because it's efficient, it makes sense, it's inexpensive. So that's what's special about it, and then it's a whole bunch of people that have been in this all their life, right? That have dedicated their lives to it, like myself, that this is what we know. And we want to see, we're a bit patriotic, I would say. For me, that's what it is, and it's not about being a xenophobe or any of that and saying, screw every other country. It's not about that at all. It's just that it's been all taken away not all of it, but a lot of it's been taken away. And I'll share a story. One of the first places I worked, actually, I think it was the first place I worked in welding and fabrication and that sort of stuff. Their main client was Hershey Chocolate Factory, right?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what do you? Okay.
Well, those machines are made from metal. I mean,
all of it.
All of it. Exactly. So,
and there's a whole, subsector that is, catering to that manufacturing facility, right? That's just making Hershey Kisses or peanut butter cups, right? But
in clean rooms, probably, I would imagine, to some degree. I mean,
to some degree, it wasn't quite as good as it would be today back then.
Of course, right.
But so that kind of decimated that whole local economy when they decided, okay, well, we're going to go to Mexico or wherever they can do it cheaper, right?
Sure.
Because there was definitely some disputes with payment there. There were some issues there. But the thing is that it just had a ripple effect, right? The local economy. So, and that happened all over North America, right?
Well, and I mean, not to show my bias or stereotype too early, but like being in the steel industry doesn't seem like it's the smartest, folks. These are not the Harvard or the McKinsey folks that I think of. But, I'm jaded. I'm in the entertainment capital of the world, Los Angeles, and West Coast is filled with technology companies. And if it isn't sexy or new or getting venture capital funding, it's not newsworthy almost. It's ho-hum.
I agree. And I've run into a lot of that. And, it's not sexy. You're right. But there's definitely some things that are happening in other industries. Like, let's take Amazon, for example, right? I mean, that guy started with nothing.
Right.
And he built one of the biggest companies in the world. But some of the things that he's doing, all those, upsells on a website, buying whatever it is you're buying on that, they're all commodities, and you're buying them on a website. And then he's got, the recurring revenue model with Amazon Prime. And I mean, all these things can be transferred to other industries, right? And
sure.
I learned that from Jay Abraham, right?
Right.
And
he's our local marketing genius here in Southern California, by the way.
Yeah, he is. He's a marketing genius everywhere.
Right. Right. He just happens to live here.
Yeah. So you see all these things. I mean, e-commerce, right? Artificial intelligence now, right? There are so many of these tools, and that's kind of where, we want to help these guys exit their businesses that are boomers. They're tired. They don't want to do much more, and because they've been working their butt off for 50 years. But then there's a new generation that, wants to see some of these things in place, right? So it's that transitioning of an industry, transitioning of a company, and then transitioning the whole industry to being a part of that digital economy, right? So
I want to talk about that a little bit, because as I was doing my work in the machining and tooling industry, and believe me, I mean, I think everyone probably knows, and you do too, it was not as a welder. It was more just as a management consultant coming in and helping them to do, time management probably was a big topic, leadership development.
Sure.
But the big issue in that industry, and I bet still is, there's no schooling or programs that get people to go from high school or college into trades, into the machining and tooling industry. And so that was probably the biggest issue in the industry, was there's no people coming up through the ranks that really understand how this stuff is made. And the ones who are coming up through the ranks, the only thing they understand is like CNC, am I saying this right? Computerized numerical control operated equipment, which is great if you're a new machine shop. But if you're sitting around with a bunch of old Bridgeport type machines and welding, right? I mean, they're not craftspeople. So a lot of the machinists I worked with, they were small $1 million, $2 million businesses. These were elevated craftspeople that were operating as job shops. And So there was no one to come in and replace these people. I don't know what is happening to those people unless they become computerized and digital, and then they're finding workers that are coming into it, or if we really are creating educated people that are semi-skilled or skilled to come into their industry. But this was a big problem to have some succession going on in this industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's changing, and it's a continual problem. And I will say, just to touch on, one of your previous comments or questions, and I think it's a more fundamental thing that's going on, right? I mean, we've got the whole university, college push to everybody. Everybody's in $120,000 debt now. Everybody's got a university degree. So what's your advantage? It's almost like that's become the new high school, right? So, but nobody can get jobs. While that was happening, it's almost like you got pegged. Okay, if you're not going to do those things, well, here's the alternative, which is the trades, right? And I'll tell you, that's totally wrong, because not that it's wrong. Maybe the word wrong is not the right. It's just not accurate to a lot of these guys, because they learn differently. They're different. I mean, I had to do the hands-on stuff, right? That was me. Doesn't mean I'm stupid. Yeah. It just meant that I'm different than the next guy that was, a math guy. And, and as I work with...
And by the way, we're talking as if people know what your background was, but tell people like quickly. Yeah. I mean, you were a welder, right? That's how you...
Yeah, that's where it started for me. I mean, it started originally with Lego. That's where it started.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I was never good at Legos. No, never that interested, never that good. And yeah, but my mechanical engineering abilities were quickly pointed out in third grade that I didn't have a lot. So,
okay.
Right. So it was like, focus on something else, Jonathan. This is not what you're going to be good at.
Yeah. Well, and that's good guidance. Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's true today. But...
Well, no, I found it in a report card when I was probably 20 years ago, looking through old school papers going, oh, wow, my mechanical aptitude was not very high. No wonder why I never worked on cars or built, I used to build transistor radio. What were they? Some of those radio, I can't even remember what they were. Short ham radios.
Okay.
CB radios?
CB radios.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But it wasn't a long-lived career as a 12-year-old.
There you go.
So I'm sorry. I digress.
No, that's okay.
Let's go back to you.
So my background, what was my background? So automotive, I thought that was what I wanted to do, right? I kind of enjoyed that. But it was okay. But what I really cared about and learned pretty quickly was that I liked the welding part of it. I liked to put things together and weld and with metal. I don't know. There was always like this genetic memory or something like metal. I was always attracted to it. I don't know what that means. Like there's some blacksmiths in my heritage, right? So,
interesting. Okay.
I think there's something there. But I was always attracted to it. So then I went to school for welding, industrial welding and fabrication, and did very well at it. I mean, so much so that they actually had me help with the night course that they had at the same time. So, which was a great experience for me, because you can't really teach something until you can teach it to somebody else, right? Or excuse me, you can't really learn something until you teach somebody else, right? So that was a great experience. Came out of there and then went to work for this company that I was mentioning with the Hershey situation. So worked there and then continued to move throughout Canada, doing different things. Building Euclid dump trucks was one of the coolest jobs I had.
Okay.
Which, if you're unfamiliar, those are like those big, giant dump trucks you would see like in the mining pits.
Okay.
The guy would stand beside and he'd be like, this big, and the truck would be this big kind of.
Okay.
So I helped. It was at a place called DeRose Manufacturing in Guelph, Ontario, and we built we helped build the Hitachi frames, which were another facility in Guelph. They got the offload of that and helped them out, the overflow, I should say. And anyway, so I moved out to Calgary and put up structures. Nothing was super tall. I only went up to 3 stories. Did the beam walking and all that stuff. And I mean, that was just I loved that. That was a risk and it was fun.
Wow.
And that was, I think that putting structural steel up would be, that's like one of the most, I don't know, free jobs in the world I've ever done. And I would say that would be something I'd go back to,
Wow.
It's a young man's game. I don't think I would want to do it in my 50s, but not that I'm in my 50s, but I'm just saying that, it's not something I'm going to go back to, but I would. Like if I was 20, I would go back and do that.
I'm having the pictures or images. These are famous photographs of people in New York that are
I wasn't that high.
That high. Right?
I wasn't that high.
No. Wow, that is crazy. That would never be allowed today in terms of safety. Never ever.
No. So along the way, obviously, you get to know a lot of people and you learn a lot of things. And then I went to work for a company not far from me now, about 2 hours away, called Alliance. And they catered to manufacturing facilities like Procter & Gamble, Magna, that thing. It was always about speed, right? Speed was the main thing. And then I moved up through there into management. And that was a very interesting role. I learned more about myself than anybody else, what managing people, like that's a hard, especially when it's a bunch of people that have, big opinions and they, we're all in the same, we all think we know everything, right?
Yeah. So, well, I was going to ask you about the transition into management and when that happened because not a lot of people coming out of the schooling that you went to and the path that you took probably made that transition into management.
Well, I don't know. I mean, yes and no. I pushed my way in because I knew that was where I wanted to go. I'm just fortunate enough to be raised by a guy that he's always thinking business. He's always thinking about growth, mindset, and that sort of stuff. Shout out to my dad. So he got me onto reading books around that time.
Okay.
And so I started to read some books and, about business and leadership and all this stuff. So it was really good timing that it kind of happened. And maybe that was his design. I'm not sure.
And how old were you approximately? Because I have a follow-up question coming right away.
Sure. I was 27 when that started. So 27, 28, you still think you know everything.
Of course. So pre-27, when you were getting into welding, what was his thoughts about that? Did he think this wasn't good enough for my son, or was he happy like you're following in a tradition? Or
that's a good question, and that's probably one I would have followed up with too. My parents were very supportive of anything that I believed in, that I believed was, that I was good at, and it was always be the best at what you do.
Right.
And for me, and lots of people would argue this, but I felt that I'd hit a point where it was like, okay, I need to get to the next stage, which was, the business type things, the learning the financials and learning how to manage people. Because what I tried first was just being rude and grumpy and honest. It didn't work, right?
Right.
So you learn from your mistakes.
Right.
And
by the way, I think that what your dad, I don't know if the word is taught you or the word is coming to my mind, is inculcated into you, like into your thinking, which is that I think that behavior is one of the telltale signs of a successful behavior that a parent can instill in a child, especially a child who's going to be a next generation leader in a business, is that you can do it. Like you're really, you're good. Like this supportive behavior that a parent brings to a child.
Yes.
And I mean, there's also a behavior where a parent, maybe a child fears a parent and feels they're not good enough. But it doesn't ever make for a good, successful transition. So
no, and that may have been maybe that's where you thought it was going. And I appreciate that. But that was not it. And I'll tell you, it's interesting thinking back because I have kids now, right? And it's, you don't really, the things you pick up on the way through as being raised, you don't totally sink in until you've had your own, right?
Right. 100% agree.
Dad was always like very adamant about keeping me humble. Greg, you're average. You can do whatever you want. But
Okay.
you are average. When and that, you know what,
Okay.
that at one time that was, I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Thanks for the encouragement, man.
Right.
But it was to keep me humble so that, if something did happen, there was success that happened. It wasn't, oh, I did this all on my own, or, and I've come to learn that through working with people too, is they keep you humble, right? It's like you can't do something in life and make success without other people helping you along the way. And that is evident through my upbringing and where I am today, right? And I've still got a long ways to go, John. Long ways to go. I'm not a success story. I look at the industry as it's been a success story, and we're just going onto the shoulders of giants before me, and we're going to continue to make it a success again, right? Because back to what we were talking about before, we lost a lot of it, and there's a lot of appetite for moving this industry forward. And the other reason for that is that we have a whole void of baby boomers that are retiring, just business owners, but people that are working in the industry and doing the things, right? So we're almost forced to do innovation because there aren't enough people to fill all the roles, right?
Yeah.
So that's where AI comes in, robotics and all of these automation processes come in. I mean, we're at an interesting time because we have, like, what are people going to do when AI starts to, fill all the jobs, which is already happening?
Right.
I believe.
Are you seeing that already? Are you seeing robotics? I mean, I guess.
Oh, for sure. That's been happening. It's been happening
for decades,
20
maybe.
years,
Okay,
30,
right.
20 years that I can remember.
Okay.
But I guess the thing is, it's getting more cost effective, not effective, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Cost perspective. Right. But I think obviously these large corporations have a lot more information than I do. And there's a reason why they're doing that, because there aren't enough people. And also the robot doesn't complain. But when it comes to,
I don't know if they're cheaper, but yeah.
I don't know if well, up front, they're
more expensive. Right. Yeah. But maybe in the long run, they're cheaper. Yeah. Interesting.
So, but again, this comes back to people can only do, like, people have more value. Every single person has more value to bring an organization than doing repetitive tasks. So if we can implement technology to do the repetitive things that nobody wants to do anyway,
right,
then we can start getting more creative in these businesses, start doing the things that only people can do, at least at this point, until there's artificial general intelligence. But that's a whole different conversation that I'm not smart enough to talk about, but I get the concept, right?
Yeah. Well,
so
I mean, it's pretty interesting to watch the technologies that we've seen in our lifetime and how quickly they get adopted.
Yeah.
Someone was just telling me and explaining to me about OpenAI and ChatGPT, and it really launched in November, and it's already got 100 million users or subscribers, and it's faster than its adoption curve is faster than, well, he was comparing it to Instagram, which is not a great comparison, but
I don't think so.
But I mean, how fast it's, and so you kind of wonder how these new technologies are being adopted by successors. I call them disruptive successors, because to be successful in the industry that you grew up in, that maybe was your mom or dad's or grandparents' business, you have to transform that business. You have to, at a minimum, bring technology, whether it's just basic level CRM or ERP stuff that's help you manage the business. But you're probably going to have to look at, where's the industry going? I mean, for years, I worked in the landscape industry and still do to some degree. But, now you're seeing autonomous mowers. You're seeing, I mean, I got my start in the industry 20 years ago by helping to develop a marketing strategy for the release of internet-enabled controllers that turn on and off the irrigation systems at golf courses, schools, large homeowners associations. So, and then could be turned off if it was raining. It would automatically maybe detect that there was a lot of moisture in the soil. So
that's cool. That's
cool. I mean, it's really expensive to send people around to go shut off, clocks and controllers and, valves and stuff like that. So if this stuff can be detected and managed remotely, I mean, it's pretty amazing. So tell us what maybe a success story in your industry, in your business, where the succession to the next generation really required some major leadership and transition or transformation of the business. If something comes to mind, or if you want to speak in more generalities, yeah, I'd love to hear that.
Well, generalities in a sense. Okay, well, what I'll talk about, because I'm pretty new at this, Jonathan.
Okay,
and I don't have any success stories to share with you.
Okay, but you're in the game.
But I've got some bad stories to share, and I think there's more value.
Yes.
In the mistakes that other people make and these sorts of things. Yeah. So I worked for a company once, right? And what happened was, before my very eyes, like I saw this happen. And this, this is a story I share with people that I'm working with because it's relevant, where you have a business owner that he's built this business up from nothing, right? And this guy is the sales guy. He's the manager. He's all the things. He wears all the hats, right? And when he decides he's had enough and he decides to move on, and somebody buys him out, and there's no transition period to gather all the information from him, or more importantly, extend the trust that he's established with all the clients from him to the new owner, it will fall apart, and this one I'm thinking of is in trouble. They're in trouble. They didn't go through that transition, and it's a relevant story because it happens all the time.
Sure.
And nobody wants that. And the thing is that happens, there's no education around it. It's like you want to buy a business, you're all excited. Okay, let's buy this thing. And you think it's going to work out great. You're hopeful. Everybody is. But the reality is you got to ask yourself, like, what is it that's going to go wrong?
Right. Sure.
And that's the thing that I've learned the most, and I've become somewhat of a cynic when it comes to business deals, because I've been screwed, and a lot of deals that we almost had across the finish line. And then somebody said, and this is after I spent money on due diligence, right? And then they say, oh, well, we don't have the money to get this deal done. It's like, oh, okay, well, why didn't you tell me this before I spent,
right,
a vast amount of money on due diligence? So anyway, that's part of my learning curve as a businessman. It makes me a better businessman now today because I've made those mistakes. But it's surrounding yourself with people that have seen these things. And at that time, I didn't ask enough questions. So it's more about a person.
Yeah.
Admitting and being humbled to the fact that, oh, maybe I don't know, and I do need to ask for help. And I've really, from the industry that I come from, one we're talking about right now, there's a lot of ego involved. Maybe there is in every other one, John. I'm not sure.
I think probably so, but I mean, it may be more ego again. Yours is an older industry.
Yeah.
So there's a different level of a different type of ego.
Yeah.
I guess my friend would call it peacock management, where they throw up their feathers and look how beautiful I am. I'm untouchable. But
yes,
look, there's a lot of ego in the newer industries in tech, but
true.
It's not hardened. The values maybe are not hardened like versus a plumber, which is typically a third, fourth, multi-generational, grandfather and sons and sons. There's an ego there that is very different than, and probably more akin to the steel and metal industry than the newer industries. So,
that's a good point.
I get that. I wanted to just go back to something you said though, and because the people that I've met who are in the mergers and acquisition, investment banking, the ones that are really savvy and seasoned, they're quick-witted. The smarter ones know how to cut right to the questions that point out the risk, because the reality, and I think you'll agree with me, Greg, is more deals don't close than do close. More people list their business thinking it's going to sell, actually, than the transactions conclude. And owners have an overinflated sense of what the value of their business is to them.
Because they're emotionally invested, right?
Exactly. And so
it's worth more to them. I mean, it just is.
It is. Right.
And that when I'm coming along or whoever, like I don't have that emotional attachment. Like I'm a good buyer in our space because I have an emotional attachment to the people. However, sometimes I can't get there in the dollars, right? It's not, I'll share a story. There was a company in Alberta, and these guys, they were doing like 6 million in sales. Their margins were normal. I mean, they wanted, 12 million bucks. 12 million bucks. And it was like
2 times their sales value. I mean, what kind of EBITDA or cash flow were they kicking off? I mean,
it was like 10, 15%, right?
Okay. Well, that's
so here's the thing, right? You come into this situation, these guys, I don't know what they thought, but you can't get there. You just cannot. There's not that much goodwill. There's just not, it's not a high-tech company. You're not recurring revenue here. You don't have a subscription database. I mean, it's just, so you run into that a lot and you understand because it's their baby, it's their child, more or less, and anyway, it's a hard situation to have. So I appreciate the transition because that's what I've learned in 3 years is learning that at the beginning, it was, I bought a list. I made all the phone calls to this list and say, hey, you want to sell your company? Literally, that's what I did.
Right. Well, you didn't know better.
I didn't know better. And, I'm expecting to make the call and maybe on the second or third one, oh yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah, of course.
It was absolutely not the way it went at all. Right. Yeah. So what happened is I learned that there's more to this story, right? There's people involved. They're emotional about it.
Yeah.
They care about their people. They want to know what's going to happen after they leave, right? And so that's what I'm cognizant of,
that's an interesting. So I wonder where you're at in your current development of your business and your business development work with potential clients, because for some companies, and some maybe more so in the steel and metals industry, is that they're caring about their people and the next generation.
Yeah.
Many companies, many industries are not thinking about their people. They're thinking about, I guess they are to some degree, right? A company that's other shareholders has to think about their shareholders first. That's how they think about it. But your folks maybe are thinking about more of their employees first. I mean,
yeah, they are.
Or is that an uphill battle? Are you swimming upstream like a salmon trying to find those companies that really, or those owners that really care about their people and are wanting to raise the next generation of steel makers?
And I would say that, we found one. I'll answer that in a little more detail, but to answer that, we found one we're working on right now that is just, it's a beautiful scenario because, these people, they're beautiful people first off, and then they started this company from nothing. They've not hired friends, but the friends, like their employees became their friends, right? One of their biggest concerns was what's going to happen to all the people, after we make this transaction. And I said, well, being from the industry, I want to see them succeed just as much as you do. So I'm not coming in as and I know this is no offense to any private equity because there's lots of good ones, but there's a lot of bad ones too, where they'll come in and they'll increase the bottom line by, getting rid of people. Well, that is like not at all what I'm looking to do because these are my people, right?
Right.
There's other ways to get to increasing the bottom line that doesn't involve getting rid of people. So, when it came to that situation, which I'm in the middle of right now, it's, I'll put it on paper, that there would be, I can't say I will not fire anybody because there may be situations, right?
Or you don't have a good, a bad apple or,
I mean, come on, but like I got to be realistic in that way. But also I'm saying I will never use firing as a way to increase the bottom line. Because, that would just be counterintuitive to the way that I think, right?
Right.
And the way that they think. So they were very appreciative of that. But a lot of times it comes down to price, and that's the hard pill to swallow for me. I brought a lot of value to the table in many cases, but I'm not everybody else. I don't know. Everybody has different motivations, and you don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, it comes down to dollars and cents a lot of time. But it's also that it's the dollars and cents with it, and a combination of that with, what's going to happen after we leave.
So in this particular example, what does the merger or acquisition look like in terms of leadership? Is there an internal general manager who is going to continue to run the business, or
exactly
that person was developed already? And so the owner or owners were able to, oracularly speaking, step away from the business for a week or 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and know that it's still running itself? Or
yes and no. I would say that the gentleman that owns it, he's like myself, and I'm like him, where he loves the industry, like he wants to be there.
Okay.
Yes, they have a vice president. That's the first guy I'm going to, like, Mr. Vice President, let's become partners. I want you to have a stake in this thing because, he's got a lot of knowledge that I don't have. It'd be pretty arrogant for me to come in and say, I know everything.
Of course.
About the business. That would be stupid. Even though I know the industry, that there's always a certain dynamic and culture. It's a little bit different, just the little things, the nuances in an organization that I couldn't assume, right? So it's bringing him into the fold.
And you're taking an equity position in this company, it sounds like. And are you going to take an active management role? I mean, will you physically go to the...
That's my goal, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to go, like, my vision, which is where everything starts, I might add. Just for those that
haven't read the book
or whatever, haven't gone down the path of being a founder. Like, a lot of the stuff, this all starts with thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And then thoughts get to paper, and thoughts get to having conversations. And I just can't share the amount of times I've heard that, that's just, whoa, that's crap. That doesn't make sense. But it's not crap. It's real. Everything. You get up out of the bed in the morning. I mean, that's a thought. You have breakfast. That's a thought. How's that any different than starting a company? Is
that some of what you'll bring to the business? Is it like a new level of thinking, or?
Well, so let me back up. I was interrupting. I totally went off on a tangent there, but
that's okay.
My vision is I want to go down on the floor, and I will be there until the cows come home. I will be there for months and months. My goal is to get to know the guys on the floor and, the women. There's not many women there, but that's just kind of the nature of the industry. But is to get to know them, talk to them. Hey, how's it going today? Like, what can I do to help you? And since I have the hands-on experience, I'll work with them and help them out, right? And so there's a differentiator, right? I'm not a banker, and I can think like a banker.
Right.
I'm not always going to be wearing, no offense to bankers, I know lots of them. Right. I have a banker on my board, but it's, they want to see that you give a shit, and nobody cares until they care.
Right.
So that's part of the vision. That's part of the vision. Get to know the dynamics of it all, get to know the people. And, and then while that's happening, it's okay, where can we tweak? We don't want to come in and disrupt the whole thing. We want to tweak. We want to know what's working here. What can we do better here? And I've got some amazing people around me that, it's like a phone call. Okay, we need to fix this. How do we do that? Right. So, I mean, all that is so exciting too.
It's great. So as we move towards a close of the show, I want to have you tell our listeners a little bit about your business. It's called Metal Merger Corp.
Yes.
Are there other Greg Sheldons who are looking to get, on the factory floor and help with management thinking and bring the level of expertise? Or
I'm sure there are.
So you've brought together an association or loose association of people who bring
I would
finance, strategy, people, sales, marketing. So is that what your business is about? Is bringing experts to enterprises that you're looking to help transition?
That's right.
Beautiful.
I would say that early on, I had this vision of, we would buy a company and then we'd buy some others, and that has a whole bunch of accretive effects financially. But I knew that I couldn't know it all and I didn't know it all. I'm smart enough to know that I'm not wise enough or have all the knowledge to do all these things myself, right? So it was like, okay, who can I find that does, right? So I did. I went and I mean, some people have come and gone, and that's fine. That's just the way it goes. But yeah, that's what it is. We bringing to the table some things that your traditional private equity isn't bringing, I believe. And then, yeah, some innovations around the people, the finances, and the technology. So, yeah.
Are you seeing other PE companies that are as hands-on as you are? I guess I'm about to answer my own question. I think when they're in the smaller company spaces and they're smaller PE firms, meaning they're like an individual or two that are looking for a business or two, or a handful to invest in, and they're hands-on. But if they're more institutionalized in terms of and maybe if they're getting outside shareholder money, now they've got to have more bets, more.
I would say,
they can't.
I would say that's true. Absolutely. What I've seen even shift in the couple of years I've been doing this is that the private equity has realized there's a lot of smart people out there that can help them, so they will help fund these types of things. I've had these conversations with private equity where it's like, here's my vision, this is what I want to do, here's the numbers, it makes sense because the industry is so fragmented and it's a whole spiel. But they're willing to get behind that, right? Because I can bring opportunity to the table and I can bring return on cash, right? So are there other ones doing what I'm doing? Not exactly. I would say venture capital is doing some things where it's more focused on technology only. There's definitely lots of those out there, where they're doing like commodity trading platforms and these sorts of things. And that is great. It doesn't really fit what I'm doing. Like that could be a great addition too. Like, okay, we do this with that. We improve the time on and the time and transparency on trading. That could be something down the road. But again, it's a people first thing. Where it is. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I've just enjoyed this conversation, this call. I'm going to unofficially label you rather, as a flag carrying disruptive successor. You're carrying the flag for the next generation of leaders in what will soon be, if it isn't already, corporate America, maybe small, medium-sized enterprises that want to get more professionally managed. That has to happen if they're going to transfer their business.
Yes. Can I add something to that?
Yeah, please.
This is something I always say, innovation's coming. It's like it's here.
Right.
It's totally evident from ChatGPT. If you aren't going to change, your competition is, and they're going to blow you out of the water. So take your pick, right?
Right. Grow or die.
Grow or die. And if you look at the stock market 50 years ago versus today, it's a whole different story. And that will change again in the next 50 years, et cetera. So that happens in private industry as well, right? So it's an ever evolving cycle. So thanks for the label. I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you're the first. So you're right there with me. If I come across someone in the metal and steel industry that's looking to transition, I now have a go-to resource. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well,
Greg,
hey, I would love to, if you ever wanted an episode, come on my show and we can do that.
Yeah.
All right.
Always happy to. Yeah. I'd love to talk about the value of a playbook in a company's business. And I'm sure that you are helping your clients bring, maybe you don't call them playbooks, but our playbooks are how to run meetings, how to make sure you're measuring things that matter and regularly looking at them, and setting priorities and setting goals and moving people's leadership and emotional intelligence and management of all that stuff forward, so that, and like you said, it all begins with thought. And so sometimes it's giving them books to read that are going to help elevate their mindset. Usually I start with that, but having a playbook around execution disciplines, having a playbook around people, around hiring, around best practices, around recruiting, around creating a culture that's attractive, that people want to work, want to come and join as a company. Super important. And then, playbooks around strategy and around cash management, also, leadership development, all important stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. I find one of the hardest things is because once they get down that path, it's great. It's just getting that initial hurdle. I wonder, what your experience is with that, like the initial hurdle of like going from not wanting to learn anything to, okay, now they're going down a good path. Like, is it, do they have to hit a rock bottom of some kind? What do you think?
That's a really good question. Oftentimes it might be driven by their frustration, and that could come from hitting a rock bottom. But oftentimes those people are only able to elevate so much because learning, like you were inspired by your dad to do at a younger age, like the neurons in your brain and get formed. If you're a learner when you're young, you'll always be a learner and you'll never age out. Like, look at Warren Buffett, like he's never aging out with learning that, and he may not be the early adopter on technology, but he's learning about it. And and these are super important things. So I think the hard thing, Greg, is to get someone who was not a learner to become a learner once they're older. When they're under, like I like to coach people who are under 40, ideally even under 35, because their brains are starting to harden and we're more difficult to teach as we get older, unless we've had that always wanting to be learning and growing kind of a mindset. And, shout out to Tony Robbins. I think that's what he's doing for the masses, is he's creating a learning mindset. And I've known Tony. I did some work with Tony back when he and I were in our early middle 20s. And not everything he was espousing was accurate, or, some of it was based in his thinking and philosophy, but the guy is relentless with his learning and growing and changing. And like, those are the best people or clients to work with. Working with people who are shut down around and have fixed ideas or a fixed mindset, really tough to overcome this stuff. It's like, I don't know how the people made those men on Mount Rushmore, because there was a lot of chipping away at a lot of stone. It's pretty hard to, but Berkeley, to get people to come to life. And when they've been really fixed and hardened on their attitudes or beliefs, it's tough. It's a lot of tough work. And sometimes it's not worth the effort. Rather just go find someone who's more motivated and wants to be the change maker. And hopefully they're not sort of in the lunatic fringe category like an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs, because, forget it. Those guys must be impossible to coach. They're completely unmanageable. But these are the geniuses of the world that are setting the world on fire and,
that's right,
creating new industries and changing industries. So.
There's lots to learn from both sides. Warren Buffett, I've learned so much from him, and like he only invests in Coca-Cola and like bubble gum. Like it makes so much sense to me.
And Hershey's probably.
Well, Hershey, like he doesn't
like
it's hard
America companies.
It's hard to screw up those things. And from an investment perspective, it makes so much sense. You can't innovate a stick of gum or a can of Coke, really.
Right. Right.
But it's an interesting world. So look, I appreciate your time. It's been awesome, man.
Yeah. Thanks for chatting.
I'll send you an email about connecting again.
Awesome. Look forward to it. And
man.
Folks, I hope that you took some lessons away from this conversation. Here's a gentleman who's been involved in an industry, stayed true to his industry, found opportunities, and is helping others find their freedom and find opportunities. And so every industry, I think, has got those opportunities. You have to have a disruptive and successive mindset to be able to take a business and an industry to the next level. And so stay tuned for future episodes. You know the drill. If you like this show, tell others about it, share it, give us a great rating on your listening podcast application of choice. and stay tuned for future episodes. Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.